Welcome. We're Team Bees, and we're here to present to you our submission for the Zurich Enterprise Challenge. Our task was to identify the top 3 countries to overcome decline in sales for Bicker AG, a grocery retailer in Europe, in the countries in Central and South America, and also the one additional country we identified in Asia, being India, because of its growth prospects, its market size, and also its recent developments in foreign direct investment policies. We analysed the 8 countries on risk room to understand how the political, the business and economic risks affected each other and the knock-on effect changes in those risks would have on the context of our business. Before we went any further to do a detailed analysis, we had to make some assumptions about Bicker AG. The first assumption would be that it would sell in major metropolitan cities, and secondly, they would source and produce all the goods and sell in the domestic market. What this enabled us to do was downgrade the impact of some of the risks. For example, if we were to produce and sell in the domestic market, the extent and the procedures of the custom regulations wouldn't necessarily be an effect that we would consider. I'm now going to pass you over to Abhinav, who's going to talk to you about the weightings of each of those risks and how we came to the sensitivity analysis that we came to.
Thank you, Kyle. We looked at the data on the risk room and tried to rank the countries related to each other for each and every risk factors mentioned there. Green means low risk, red means high risk. Next thing that we did was, it was important to understand that what are the risk factors out of these which is more relevant to the groceries and which are not, and that's depending on that we gave a relative weightage to each of these factors and used that to calculate the score and then rank the country. The top 5 factors are mentioned there. The next step was to look at how have these risk factors evolved over the last 7 years and then adjust the rankings of the countries depending on the trends of the risk factors. The trends has been categorized as mentioned in the 4 different sections, and then weightage, and the weightage has been given accordingly. The risk of the ranks of those countries has been adjusted as shown in the presentation here. The top 3 countries using this ranking criteria are Brazil, Uruguay and India. But at the same time we wanted to have a sense check and look at few extra factors. The 3 new factors that we looked are market size, growth prospects and modern retailers. If you see here, Mexico, which is a 100 billion market, is huge in comparison to the Uruguay, which is just 7 billion market. And also the stand of the modern retailers is high compared to Uruguay in Mexico. And that is why we decided that Uruguay is not an attractive target, and Mexico, which was initially ranked 4, came in the top 3 countries. Now I'll pass over to Naveen to understand the risk mitigations and impacts.
Thanks, Abhinav. So that's how the 3 countries set on the risk flow in terms of different risks. So I'm going to touch upon the business and economic risks and how we mitigate that. Rising food prices and inflation, we think they are interlinked. So how we're going to mitigate that is going and targeting the urban population, and as well as opening discount stores and perhaps explore online options. Of course, the impact is we are limiting the target segment, and also it will have probably a lower margin. But the upside is that we have better access to infrastructure. Another key important risk we have to consider is efficacy of enforcing contracts, given that these are emerging economies. How we're going to mitigate that is careful selection of partners with proper due diligence, as well as create a relationship-oriented negotiating to build trust. Of course, the downside is higher cost and time to conduct due diligence. Now, one of the factors that is extent of market domination, it is going to be dependent on each country. Now, for Brazil, we know Carrefour went in on their own and they did not do well. So we will take lessons learned from them, and we will acquire existing player, so we get the market expertise. Mexico, Walmart and Carrefour already present, so to compete with them, we believe a better strategy is acquiring several fragmented local players and consolidate. Similarly, in India, we will create joint ventures with local players to gain local consumer knowledge. On the impact side, of course, it is going to be a costly in terms of acquiring and creating joint venture, which means sharing profits with others, but the upside is, of course, we are reducing the risk of failure. So Gulmira is going to talk us through the political risks.
Thank you, Naveen. Now let's cover political risks, and out of these ones that we identified, we want to highlight corruption. In order to tackle that, the company could set up anti-corruption policies based on local regulations, and monitor to enforce them strictly. Also, the company is pretty strong in Europe and has its own in-house established ethics and anti-corruption policies, so it can bring them to the emerging markets. And the impact of that, it involves time and cost in order to implement this properly. And the second one we want to consider is political violence, and in order to tackle them, the company could take an insurance to secure its assets, inventory, and process non-disruption. And the further due diligence topics we want to highlight and suggest as to investigate further for these top 3 countries is financials. The company could consider analyzing costs and return on investment. Volatility of the commercial real estate, because the company is in retail business and is quite important. Critical success factors and also technology risks to consider. Thank you very much. This is the end of the presentation.